is such a moment for me. I have the two beautiful people in front of me who I've known for a long time and are such great representatives of everything I had hoped Mama Rising would be when I first created it. Sarah and Sam, thank you so much for joining me.
Hello.
How exciting is this? Here we are.
Who would have thought?
I know, right? Oh, I did. I knew that you two would get along and build something powerful and important. So let's start at the beginning, though. Both of you are Mama Rising graduates and have really been super passionate about bringing matrescence and Mama Rising into workplaces in your own way, and now are collaborating, which we'll explore a little bit more in a moment. But let's start first of all about why you're so passionate about this work, about making sure we support mothers in the workplace differently, and your own experience of that led you here. Sarah, do you want to start?
Sure, love to. So my personal experience was I'm in corporate, and I was working for a corporate real estate at that point in time. And after I birthed Archie, so I've got two children, Archie who's 7, Lotta who's 5. But after I birthed Archie, I went back to the workplace thinking that I can do anything. I can just tick the box and add Archie to all the list of great things that I could do. And I was enjoying my work, but I wasn't loving it, and I couldn't figure out why. I returned to work part-time, and I could, just feeling that sort of sense of guilt, asking to be excused from meetings to go and breastfeed within the sick bay at the time that had no lock on the door, to rush out right on the dot at 4:30, feeling guilty that I was doing that I was asking for special favours. Hiding even, so people didn't see me that I was leaving at 4:30, even though my boss had approved it, but just this enormity of guilt, and I just couldn't understand why I was feeling like this. And I would talk to my colleagues, and I would talk to my circle of friends, and everyone kind of just touched on it, but no one really sort of opened up and dived into it. And it wasn't until I came across your work, Amy. I don't know how you ended up on my Instagram feed, but you were there, and you were talking about the inner split. This feeling of mourning your old life, your old self, and then how do you merge this new part of self together? And it was just like this light bulb moment. And that's when I came to your work of Mama Rising, of really understanding what matrescence was. And as I started learning the different language around what this was, that it wasn't a personal failure of while I was feeling this way. It's actually bigger than me. It's actually more than I am. And using that language and then seeing real examples as I'd walk back into the workplace daily, seeing women around me struggle, seeing women around me leave and opt out of our business, noticing that there weren't many women in senior leadership positions. We're all just sitting in this sort of middle management area. I got angry. I got really, really angry, emotional, upset about it. And then that sort of inspired something in me of, I've got to make a change. I've got to do this for my son. I've got to do this for my daughter. I've got to do it for my nieces and nephews. And just this, call it rage. And then that's what led me to do the Mama Rising training, to figure out how I could take this to workplaces.
Oh, you gave me goosebumps when you said, and then I got angry. I remember you in the training, and same with Sam and so many of us in the training. We go through this period of sort of rage and emotion and anger, and then it we turn that into positive action. But it is that process of looking around and realizing, oh my gosh, this was the system I was living in and I didn't even realize. This was the system I was trying to succeed in. And it's impossible to succeed in this system. Just quickly, not because it's not incredibly powerful, but just for time purposes, can you share with everybody, you took Mama Rising back into your workplace, first of all, and then you did ask questions around how women were feeling in the workplace. And you did find out about the number of women who would leave after maternity leave. And you did then begin to speak directly to different women and their experiences. Can you share with us what you discovered once you went back in and asked these questions and started working in this way? What was actually happening in the environment that you were working in with these women?
Sure. The first thing that, at the end of the day, it came down to the data. The data showed that women were choosing to not come back from parental leave or leave within the first 6 months. So I wanted to understand why that was. And there were some common themes. One was the manager doesn't understand me. I don't feel supported. I don't feel valued. The next piece was, I'm overwhelmed. I can't do this anymore. The language that you've given us is like competing devotions. There was a lot around the push and the pull, this feeling that when I'm at work, I feel like I should be at home, but when I'm at home, I feel like I should be at work. And these women want to work. They want to be there. They want a career. It's part of their identity and they don't want to lose it. But yet there's this push and pull of fighting within themselves, of wanting to give their all, but actually they're having to take a step back and they're not okay with taking a step back, to give themselves permission to know that this is just a period of time and it will change. But she's thinking that, but the workplace also wasn't set up to support her to do that.
Yeah, and I love the way you said, Sarah, that when you were leaving at 4:30, you felt like you were asking for special favors. And even though it was approved by your manager and even though it was totally above board and exactly what you'd said you would do, you were hiding it. You were feeling like you were asking for special treatment. It is this internal story that often is the reason why they end up leaving. The policy's there. She got what she asked for, and yet we feel like, oh, I'm doing something wrong. I shouldn't be asking for this. That was so powerful the way you said that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's like asking for special permission outside of my colleagues that were not yet parents.
Yeah. Wow. Sam, when you became a mother, you also really were activated to support women differently, weren't you?
Yeah, so my background was in corporate, and then I had my son and I had postnatal depression, which I think obviously has a huge impact on anybody who goes through that. And then my marriage fell apart, and so that was another huge impact on my life. And I was first introduced to your work, and if I'm honest, I think I had a bit of a chip on my shoulder about it, and I was like, I'm fine. I don't need that. What even is that stuff? As if I can't just go back to work and live my life the way I was before. And then I remember talking to Caroline, who's a mutual friend of ours, and she said something to me like, it sounds like you really thought that you were much more fun before you had your child. And I burst into tears. And she was like, I think Amy's work might help you. And I still resisted it for quite a long time, but I had by the time I actually did do your Mama Rising Facilitators program, I was working in the gender equity space already and in diversity space, the inclusion space. And one of the reasons I joined was because I really was sort of ready to I needed some new energy and new insights and ideas and a fresh way of looking at things. And you asked Sarah what was her kind of main driver. And we haven't spoken about it in this way, which is interesting, even though we're working together. And there are these real overlaps between some of the stuff, which is maybe not that surprising since we've come together and are working on this together. But one of the things that I really see is that when we don't understand the system and what's operating around us, we end up thinking it as our own personal deficiency. If I just worked harder, was smarter, had a richer husband, had a nicer boss, all of these things, then we think we'd be able to do it. But also we put a lot of that back on ourselves. If I worked harder, if I was smarter, if I could just do it, then I'd be able to, then it would be okay. But the reality is, when you're working in a workplace where you get sidelined after you have a baby, or you're at home and you're the one who's responsible for, statistically it's like 70% of domestic and care labor gets done by women. The value of free domestic labor in Australia is $650 billion. It's half of GDP, and the bulk of that is done by women invisibly in the home on top of their paid work. And, Sarah mentioned a lot of people at her old workplace leaving after they had kids, and that's not isolated to real estate or to that workplace. In fact, what we know is that 30% of women leave their work while they're pregnant or in the first year after returning to after parental leave. But my hypothesis through the work that I have done so far is that, the motherhood penalty means women are seen as less committed, less ambitious, and they face a significant pay penalty for up to a decade after they have their child. They then come back to work, and because of the motherhood penalty, they get sidelined and they get put on project work or taken out of teams or taken off leadership roles, whatever. And then they leave because their job is shit, not because they're not committed to being at work. And as Sarah said, most women I speak to want to work. They want to contribute financially to their household. They want to have financial independence and freedom themselves. They want to do something that's just for them, that's adult, that uses their mind, uses their brain, all of that kind of stuff. But the system is so rigged against us. And, when I talk about one of my personal drivers, it's really that I would like every woman to be able to have a joyful, fulfilling life. And if you are not main character energy in your own life because you're too busy looking after everybody else, because work requires so much input that you're just at capacity, well, then you can't thrive. You can't do hobbies and activities and things outside of parenting and being a partner and being a worker. And so that's actually one of my big drivers. On my, this program that Sarah and I have developed together is very much for the workplace. But I also talk on my social media, which is Women at Work AU, about women in their own lives. How do you find space for yourself? How do you even remember what it is you like to do before you have kids?
Yeah.
And I asked something recently about, what would people take a promotion if they got offered it right now? And something like 2/3 of the people were like, I am at capacity. Some people I could take it. And I think one person was like, bring it on.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah, because I'm exactly that example. I absolutely loved my job as a journalist. It was my core identity. It was everything I ever wanted to do. I hadn't gotten to the point, I wanted to go higher and bigger, and I had big goals and big ambitions. And there was no way in hell I wanted to step away from that. Had no intention of ever leaving. And yet I ended up leaving because I honestly felt like I was failing at work, and I was judged every day because I kept having to ask for special permission to just be a mother for the 3 kids that I had. And also I never saw my kids and felt like I was doing a shit job at home. So it came down to which is the worst of 2 evils here. It was not a choice in the end, but we keep saying women have a choice. No, it wasn't a choice. I couldn't keep up with all of it. Sam, can I come back to a moment that you just mentioned there as well? What do you mean by women need to have main character energy in their lives? Can we explore what that means? Because I think that's kind of what we're getting at here as well, isn't it? Like the example I just used of my own life. I wonder, once you explain to us what main character energy means and what you mean by being the main character in their life, I wonder if that's what actually wasn't happening back then, that I had lost this sense of who I was, and that it's me in the center and me being the main character here. Can you explain to us what that means?
Yeah, so it comes out in a couple of different ways. And so I'm going to illustrate it first through an example of what happens in people's personal life. One of the projects I'm working on at the moment is a research piece called Beyond the 9 to 5, where I'm interviewing working mothers about their experience. So it's what's happening in the post-COVID world, much more return to work mandates, et cetera, et cetera. And, anecdotally, 50% of women say some version of, my husband and his friends go out golfing or fishing or bike riding every weekend for 8 hours, and I'm with the kids. But then on Sunday, I want us to have some family time. So we spend time together as a family. And they don't get any time to themselves.
Yeah.
And so when I'm doing actually quite a lot of coaching of men at the moment I'm sort of subcontracting through a company that does that. And one of the things I really talk about there is like, which seems to be landing with these men, is equal access to the same quality of leisure time. So if your leisure time is going and seeing your friends and playing golf, her leisure time cannot be you watch the kids while she goes to the supermarket. That is not the same quality. And because it's so stark that most of them are like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. That's like a reasonable goal to be looking for. But because we do often, and we want to spend time with our kids and our families and stuff, of course, like we actually want to do that too. But because the dynamic is so often the guy goes off for one of the days and then it's family time for the other days. If you ask, your average 45-year-old mom, what do you like to do for fun? A lot of them say, I don't even know. I don't even know anymore. I can't remember. I haven't done it for so long. So that's how it shows up a bit in personal life. In work, it's what we see is that when a family, so Claudia Golden is where I get a lot of this from. We stand on the shoulders of giants and I think need to attribute their work. So she's a Nobel Prize winner in economics and her work is called Women in Careers. Families in careers. And she talks about this inner split that you're talking about and the competing devotions, although she uses different language for that. And it is that when a family needs flexibility, which a family needs to have some flexibility because kids need to go to activities, people get sick, the house stuff needs to happen. And it either happens by one of the parents living in the house or you outsource it, some or all of it, and pay. But what usually happens is that when the career that takes the flexibility and therefore takes less, you get less progress, you get less pay, all that kind of stuff, is almost always the woman. In Australia, we have a really strong male breadwinner model. So women step back in their careers because of what I'm saying, like these women who are like, I'm maxed out. I don't want a promotion. How can I possibly do that? And then the third bit of it is that we put on a pedestal the idea of motherhood as self-sacrifice. So a good mother is the one who gives up everything of herself for everybody else. And that is so deeply ingrained culturally that I think it can be really difficult to then assert what my needs are and that they're just as important as everybody else's in the house. And maybe you need to support your kids in a different way, but that doesn't mean that you don't get to have any support. And so that's kind of the three ways that I think that shows up in life.
Yes, it's like that. If we were to talk about these characters, what we become is we are one of the main characters is wife, mother, colleague, but there's no Amy. Is what I'm hearing you say. There is no self-identity, and mostly because there is no self-time, there is no self-capacity, there is no self-energy left over. Sarah, does that fully resonate? You and I are both like nodding as Sam's giving us all of this.
Yeah, it completely resonates with me right now at this very point in time in my life. And it's because, yes, Sam and I have this brilliant program that we're taking to the world. But the reality is I also do need some part-time work coming in. I was recently made redundant maybe about 2.5 months ago now. And whilst I'm searching for, just a role within this arena of work, I'm looking at these roles and they're all of these sort of tasks and responsibilities that you need to have or do. And I'm realizing none of that lights me up because it's actually going to take more of me than I want to give right now. I've been in that place where there was no Sarah main character. There was Sarah working. There was Sarah mother. There was Sarah wife. And I'm not willing to sacrifice that anymore. And it's a really hard piece. Like, Sam, when you say it like that, I'm like, shit. this is exactly what I'm feeling right now. And this is why I'm, we're throwing all of that energy into this type of work, because it's purposeful, because it lights me up. Because, you spoke about, Amy, you brought to my attention the 3 types of burnout. The overworked, yes, we are. The under-challenged, yes, I was doing a role that I was under-challenged in. And the third one was something around not having purposeful work.
Yes.
All of those things is what I was feeling, and I'm not willing to sacrifice that anymore. So,
amen. And I think every woman listening is probably feels the same. And this is why workplaces need to realize this. If so many women will get to the point where they're like, I'm out. I'm not willing to sacrifice my health, not seeing my kids, ruining my relationship, like all of these realizations. And I feel like it often coincides. There's sort of these 2 points, isn't there? Matrescence is where we say, nah, I don't think I can do this in this system anymore, if we're aware of why we feel the way we do. And the other one is perimenopause and menopause, where women are also like, oh no, I have sacrificed myself for too long. And this is what opens the door in these workplaces, is that it's not just we're talking about motherhood and parenthood here. We're talking about caring. We're talking about health, well-being, hormonal changes, all of the different things that up until now we have hidden and been silent about and worn the mask on. And that's changing, isn't it, Sarah? I know in your previous workplace, it was not only conversations around matrescence and motherhood that you were able to bring in, but it was also hormone health and all of these other conversations that are starting to come to light.
Yeah, who would have thought that we were holding events actually with one of our, bringing our Mama Rising superstars that I met within our course to the forefront and to corporate, where we had Monique Dixon. She was in there talking to us about our hormones. Who would have thought we'd be talking about that in corporate workplace? We had Nat talking about relationships and marriage, because we're having those real and honest conversations. It's just a light bulb moment for all of us.
It's time.
It's time.
It's time. It really, it won't be, we will not be silenced anymore. Sam.
I just wanted to add there too, someone listening might think, well, what's happening there is that women are getting like a whole lot of special dispensation. So like we're talking about menopause. Well, if they can't perform, well then, then of course they're going to be sidelined basically. And like, why would a 30-year-old man care about having talks about hormones for women at work? And I just wanted to add there, the link to the whole workplace that I don't think people always make when stuff is happening that doesn't directly affect them. So there is research to support this, but really what I want to say is what's good for mothers is good for everybody. And by that I mean, when you can turn up as your whole self at work, that is good for everybody. When you have a workplace that supports flexibility and a life outside of billable hours and what's happening in the workplace, that is good for everybody. When you can turn up and say, I'm having a mental health challenge, or my kid needs some support, or my parent is sick, or I'm just getting close to burnout, I need some time off, that is good for everybody. When you work somewhere that says, actually, you know what, going for a surf in the morning to clear your head and really like be ready to go for the day is important, that is good for everybody. And so we start with these things that are directed at one person, like a perimenopause hormone talk is for a specific demographic. But the research shows that when you do behaviors that increase inclusion of any single demographic, everybody in the organization benefits in equal measure. And that's subjective stuff like, do I have good career development support? Is my manager supportive? That kind of stuff. And objective, like organizational measures, like stronger outputs, higher performance, all that kind of stuff. And so whilst it can be easier to be like, well, this doesn't affect me, I'm never going to have a kid, or I'm never going to go through perimenopause for what, because I'm not born with that hormone set. Well, then this stuff, the fact that companies are bringing this stuff in still benefits you.
Yeah. Exactly. Brings to mind a friend of mine who is, male in his 40s. So really wouldn't benefit from any of those conversations that we've just highlighted. But in the workplace that he is in, it is one of those places that are bringing in lots of different conversations around health and well-being and everything. And as part of that, he has been able to say to his manager, I can't think when I sit. I have to walk. So he now walks like for an hour in the afternoons if he's stuck, and he calls into the meetings. And his boss now knows, we know that if he walks, he is going to bring it, but he can't be in the room for that conversation anymore because that's not how his brain works. Now, those types of changes benefits everybody, male, female, anything in between. Like, that's what we're sort of alluding to here, isn't it?
Totally. And if I could just add to that, if we bring it back to parenting and motherhood, which is where our work is really focused, is that, through this, I said before, I'm doing quite a lot of coaching with men. And the most common thing I hear them say is some version of, I want to do it differently to my dad and I want to be present with my kids.
Yeah.
And so when workplaces change to better support women and change the structures within the organization so that you can leave at 4:30 without being filled with shame, so that job design works to set people up for success, and they support the idea of shared care and men being involved, parents as well, men benefit too. They can also leave and be part of the kids' lives without it impacting their career negatively. So that's the other. And there is actually, I'm hearing a very real desire from the men that I'm speaking to. Of course, they're sort of self-selecting in, right, because they're doing coaching via a parenting program. But I think that is
but it
a
is
shift.
growing. Yeah, and
exactly.
it's growing. Exactly. The other thing that I love about what the two of you are doing is you're coming together to collaborate with this. I've been doing this work for over 10 years now, and I've often had, I'm going to be really honest here, I've often had some people reach out to me and say, oh, Amy, have you seen what so-and-so is doing? They're doing exactly what you're doing. Or I've been really encouraged to challenge the copyright or the trademark on some of my things. Or you wouldn't get somebody on the podcast who has written a book on matrescence because I want them to buy my book. I just have never agreed with this way of doing things. I think part of our redefining of success is that we collaborate. There's more than enough for everybody. And in fact, we're not even a drop in the ocean of the amount of change that we need. So we need to come together to do this together. It's literally one of the things we talk about in Mama Rising, isn't it? When you rise, I rise. I love that the two of you are doing this, that you see that you bring two different elements to this and are coming together to create this work for workplaces. Sarah, can you talk to me about the difference it makes to know that you've not only got Sam to do this with, but also, like you said, the Mama Rising community, this network of women around the world that you can draw on, because it's really a different culture in a way than how some workplaces or some people think.
I love that, what you said, like redefining what success looks like, because there is so much room for this work. And what I loved about Mama Rising was, one, firstly, the connection piece, is that I got to finally be around women that are wanting to make the same difference in this world that I want to make, have the same belief that we can actually do good. And I was really inspired by the work that, some of these women are coming to Mama Rising even with phenomenal backgrounds and studies and qualifications, and then how they're then turning that into, what we learned in Mama Rising, how they're turning that and reshaping that to their type of work that they're already doing. And then lastly was the professional network. That was probably the biggest one for me, is that I've got access to all of these phenomenal women. And then that's how I met Sam. I mean, the beauty of our working relationship is that Sam is a D&I specialist. She's been doing this for years and years and years. And then my background, well, and we've both got the corporate background, but my background is the product marketing, is how to build products, is how to deliver products, is how to facilitate that. So two of us together with the lived experience, as well as the mummerizing support network and community that we have, we can do anything.
Yeah. And when we define success now, it's like you said before, Sarah, you know, you look at the list of deliverables in a job, in a possible job that you're considering in a role, and it just doesn't light you up anymore. This is when we, through Matrescence, through motherhood, we really redefine success. And I know for me and Sam, I know that this has been something for you as well over the years. Part of my success is that I don't want to do it alone anymore. I don't want to be at the kitchen table on my own. I don't want to be throwing spaghetti at the wall, figuring out what's going to work on my own. I want to be in a room of women who fire off ideas like I do and fail together. I want to do this as a community and not on my own anymore. I know that's been a big driver for you too.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I've been working on my own business now for 5 years, and I really want. I didn't know that I would get that out of mummerizing, but I'm very happy that I did.
Good. So can you tell us what is Beyond the Break? What is this beautiful creation that has been birthed and is going to sweep the world, as you said before?
So Beyond the Break is a groundbreaking return to work program. It's dedicated to advancing gender equality by really empowering working mothers through all of the stuff that we've talked about, our own experiences and the way that we get held back systemically and internally. And it also works with the organisation and their managers to create real systemic change so that you're not sneaking out secretly at 4:30 in the evening. And so the goal is that women everywhere can thrive at work, managers are upskilled, and they can actually kind of champion policies and conditions to support gender equity, and that the working experience of women everywhere is vastly improved. And by that, workplaces are improved as well.
I love that you said systematic and internal. Sarah, can you tell us what you mean by that? I mean, I know what you mean, but I think that that's the key here, right? Because you can't have one without the other. You can't just have the systematic policy changes without then allowing the mothers to understand how they've changed as well. That's what we're really passionate about, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a mother's experience returning back to work is so incredibly unique. All those different challenges that she faces, and focusing on that internal piece, it's, helping her have some awareness that it's not the personal failure. So she's got improved well-being. She feels understood. She feels heard. She feels seen. And she's got some positive sentiment towards this organisation to know that she feels supported. Then we're focusing on the manager, as Sam said, which is giving them the language and understanding of how to support her, how to navigate, how to not just give a blanket approach because the policy said so, but how do we actually focus on her, the individual, to make change? And then them understanding those systematic barriers that she faces, which most people aren't even aware of. So bringing that awareness to the forefront to the managers as well, so they understand. And then those systematic changes within the organisation as well, because we need to address and really have a look at how organisations are set up to allow women to progress. And once you start lifting up those layers, it's the aha moment of going, right, we do need to make change. And it's not just about policy. It's about understanding the systemic barriers. It's about understanding the motherhood penalty. It's about understanding the maternal wall. It's about understanding all of that that's thrown at her, that's also thrown at the manager, because it's not easy for them too.
Yeah.
And a lot of these managers are women that have done it already before. I've done it, so why can't she? So we've got to change that too.
Oh, can we talk about that just quickly before we wrap up? Because I know we often assume that the barriers to this change come from the men or come from those who aren't having children, but there is also a bit of a generational shift and a cultural shift here that we're asking for. We need everybody to acknowledge that it doesn't work anymore. Even if our previous generation was able to manage it, it's not what we want for the future. Is that right, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, I don't. In Womankind by Kristen Ferguson and Catherine Fox, they talk about this, the queen bee, but they actually fully debunk the myth of the women holding each other down. And so I tend to think it's much more actually individual. Same as you can have a man manager who's unsupportive and unhelpful, you can have a woman manager that's unsupportive and unhelpful, or vice versa for all genders. And so, yeah, it happens, but I think the stuff that I've read is that that's not actually like a endemic thing. It's just individual, same as everything else. So, I feel quite defensive on behalf of older women when we start talking about this.
Yeah.
Because a lot of them also have done a huge amount to drive change. And starting from a place where there was no paid parental leave at all, or it was illegal to even work after they had kids or got married, and so I really think it's important to also realize, I said before, which is actually really a line I got from you too, Amy, is we stand on the shoulders of giants, and the women who drove these huge changes, who now are also come on, Buttercup, we did so much, you can do this. I don't think that that's necessarily something I want to be criticizing them for.
Yeah,
that's what I think about that.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's important to point out. And like you said, there will always be some individuals who won't see this as a positive, but, on the greater scale, I think this is coming. The changes we're hoping to see are beginning.
But I also think that also the expectations of women around this are higher than they are for men. And so there's one woman manager who's well, I did it, why can't you do it? And their kid is 17 and they had a nanny and a stay-at-home husband the whole time, and so it feels like they can't understand us. And they get much more criticism than the middle-aged man whose wife was at home the whole time, who thinks maybe women shouldn't even be at work, just secretly. And so I think there's also that contributes to that, is our expectations, same as the expectation of the good mother, of the good worker, of all of this stuff. It's high. The expectation is high for women, so they get criticized more.
I love that the two of you are doing this, that you're collaborating and really showing that you don't have to do it all. Even when you're building a business, even when you're creating the change that you want to see, you can do it together, and you can lean on each other and draw on each other's experience and expertise. We're going to pop in the show notes how people can reach out to you, especially if they're listening and they want to bring you two into their workplace, have conversations with their managers and their colleagues around this. So please have a look in the show notes to know how to reach out and to connect individually with the both of you. I am so incredibly, I don't want to sound like a mum, but I'm going to say it, I'm so incredibly proud of what the two of you are doing. It's as I said right at the beginning, this is a dream come true to see the two of you take Mama Rising and add it to what you already do in this world, and now take it to corporates in Australia and globally, I'm sure, to make sure that we do this better for all working parents. Thank you both for just being you and doing what you do.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, Amy.